Namaskar, everyone. I keep admiring Bangalore's pleasant weather every Saturday, and probably because coronavirus lockdown is helping the environment. I've fallen in love with the nature, blooming in glory, beautiful sunsets. Even you could see the wildlife on the road. So I think it's some of the silver lining in this tough period. And I hope you all have filled in your cuppa because it's going to be an extremely enriching discussion over the next 90 minutes. At the start of 2020, who thought that capital planning and its execution would be done sitting at home, following the global lockdown and maybe some global financial crisis, stress testing? It is now the time to shine all over again. And as we are navigating through the pandemic, capital planning will be at the center of every organization's short and medium term decision making. Capital planning helps to inform important decisions around strategy and balance sheet management. And it is one of the most important corporate function, according to me, that steers the organization in any challenging time. And doing this right certainly requires an enormous effort and skill set. And this time, the capabilities also needs to meet the present challenges. Now, planning has never been a particularly an easy task, but the spread of coronavirus has made it even more difficult. Financial professionals are are basically using the accuracy, some predictable planning for doing the planning and all. But this has been a very unpredictable period, and they have to really get into their best of the capabilities of budgeting and forecasting and doing a lot of analysis. Now, does the financial planning and performance management, under this unprecedented period of turmoil, does that require a new systematic approach? One that will allow the CFO and the finance team to quickly alert the company to options that are emerging? Or is this the period, the pandemic, companies are widely, different levels of liquidity and risk tolerance? So today we have an extremely diverse panel of CFOs today, and they will give a full roundup of the view on the subject. A mother dairy company with a $1 billion turnover experiencing a decline in sales in some part of the business, like ice cream as a result of COVID-19. And they may need to plan for a small non-structural changes to ensure that it is successfully weathers the crisis. By contrast, in-orbit malls, they have lost probably half of its sales or held up rentals as a result. They may need to do a complete revamp of their business planning. So the best and the worst case scenario may be different for different companies. UPL and Vora in a strong cash position may accelerate opportunities to shore up its supply chain, buying raw materials or making advanced payments to its vendors to get a more access to the resources. And they may also decide to shift resources away from those products that have seen a radical drop in sales due to the spread of the virus and focus on the one which are holding steady. For a legendary company like Sequoia, who are working very closely with the startup firms and founders, the immediate priority is to ensure that there is enough runway. So the challenges are varied, and there are probably many. And some companies have probably lost about 75% of their revenues in the last quarter, and CEO Lounge happens to be one of them. And so today the cash is just not the king. It's probably critical for the survival. And the need for the frequent, transparent communication with your colleagues, with the investor, is a part of a lot of importance today. Amid all these uncertainties, the CFO is playing a very crucial role within executive peers in stabilizing the business. So, friends, let's welcome 5 of the busiest CFOs. Anand, Vora, CFO, United Phosphorus Limited; Harshal, Kamdar, CFO, Sequoia Capital; Manas Datta, CFO, Vora; Nitin Khanna, CFO, In-Orbit Malls; Sanjay Gupta, CFO, Mother Dairy. And to moderate the conversation, we have Kabir Ahmed Shakir, former CFO, Microsoft India. And Kabir very strongly believes that preserving capital needs to be built on three very important aspects, and that is the financial, social, and human. They're all very dear friends, and I'm very grateful that they have taken out time to share their experience and knowledge in probably one of the most important discussions in today's time. I'm keenly looking forward to the discussion today, and I'll return back towards the end of the conversation to know more about these 6 CFOs that we have. And till then, Kabir, the screen is all yours.
Thanks a lot, Deepak. In fact, it's indeed a pleasure this Saturday morning to host this panel and moderate this esteemed set of panelists. A lot of them, whom I have been colleagues with or shared, dais and screen with. So it's great, and in a way surreal to kind of been doing this webinars in the last 2-3 months. But that's the new way of life. Before I kick it off, I would like to start with a huge sense of gratitude. We are all privileged, people out here who are speaking, who are probably, listening to the call. We have a roof on our head. We have a food on our plate. And this pandemic has displaced and disrupted quite a few. The United Nations believes that if it's not handled well, and then by all means, you can see that it's not being handled well. And I'm not taking a dig at anyone. It's just the inexperience that we've never seen a crisis of such magnitude in our lifetimes. That we could potentially push about 400 million people into poverty, that we could potentially wipe out 20 to 30 years of development that we have done as a human race. That is the challenge that we actually face today. We've all seen lots of crises, lots of disruptions. Most of the disruption that we have seen is something which either hits a particular industry or a continent, or a segment. So it could be a SARS, which could be geographically, or Ebola, which could be geographically limited to some part of the world. It could be a financial crisis that could hit, and reverberate the whole financial economy, or it could be disruptions on technology, displacing a few companies here and there. But we've never seen something as massive, as global, and as significant as Corona in our lifetimes, which has a human, it has an economic, and it has a global impact across the world. Which one of us forecasted at the beginning of the year that crude will go negative? How many of us thought that the GDP growth this year, next year, of all countries, including India, would go negative? How many of us ever thought that we would have Olympics or Tokyo, or the Wimbledon, cancelled for that matter? Or for that matter, how many of us thought that the skies would suddenly, be short of any flights and there will be a complete standstill of international travel? About 75% of international travel, or all flights, I would say there are very few flights that were continuing to run in the US, but barring that, most flights were all, grounded. None of this were forecast by us. So we are entering into an era which is unprecedented. It is a crisis. I believe it's going to be temporary, but it's going to be indefinite. And it will have those characteristics. And I can tell you one thing, for people on the call, if you feel confused, and I keep speaking to many leaders, and if you feel confused about the situation, then you have perfectly understood the situation. Quite often people get back and then say, oh my God, I am confused about the situation, so probably I'm not good enough. No, that is exactly the state we are in. And as long as we acknowledge this, and then move forward, is probably the first start. With all these uncertainties around it, I still believe doing nothing is not a strategy. Ostrich emulation is not a strategy, and we need to do something about it. And this series today, we are going to talk about specifically, capital. And I have, my good friends and, and colleagues, here to enlighten us on elements of, how to preserve your capital. Just because we are CFOs, I don't want us to be myopic, and I don't want any of you to judge that we are only good at, managing the numbers, side of the business. While we have a primary responsibility as functional leaders to manage the P&L and balance sheet and the long-term strategy of the company, we also have a shared responsibility along with the CEO and the board to manage the long-term health and performance of the company as well. So I believe there are two other elements of capital that every CXO needs to pay attention, not just a CFO. And it is the human capital, because there are companies which obviously have employees to run them. And if you cannot manage your employees, all this pandemic will one day wear off. You want them to be hale and healthy and come back, to become productive and contribute to the organization. So if you don't pay attention to the human capital at this stage, then it's going to be at your peril. And as CFOs, we need to ensure that we provide the right amount of resources, stimulus, and support, organizational support to be able to manage that element of the capital. The next element of the capital is the social capital, which is basically nothing but the trust capital that we have as an organization. Each one of these CFOs represent, a strong brand name, and all of us as consumers have, consumed their brand with that inherent trust. Just because there is a pandemic is no excuse for us to walk away from that trust. In fact, this is exactly the time we need to reinforce that trust and build, for it with our consumers. So that is a sneak preview of what's the discussion going to be all up to whet your appetite, so that we can get you, to stay engaged. I'm now going to, hand over the baton to my colleagues here. Before we start on, probably I will ask each one of them to talk their top of mind for 5 minutes. Give us a sneak peek into their industry, their company, their specific challenges that they are actually facing, as a result of this pandemic, and how they are overcoming, those challenges. We will deep dive, a bit more going on, but first I would like to know what's, their top of mind. We will go in the order in which, the slide is there. So I'd ask Anand to go first, then followed by, Harshal, and then Manas, and then Nitin, and then Sanjay. So we will just take, each of yours, first 5 minutes. As Deepak said, I think he's done a great job of selecting not just prolific and eminent speakers here, but also selecting a wide spectrum of industries, from people who have got their business coming to a standstill and need to rethink almost anything and everything, question every gospel, to some companies who have been, comparatively less, impacted. So that's the lovely panel that we actually have here. So I hand over the baton to Anand. Anand, over to you.
Thanks, Kabir, and thanks, Deepak, for inviting me for this excellent topic to talk on. Indeed, these are unprecedented times. I think nobody has began the year with a clue of what's going to come in front of us. But before I get into more details, I wish all those who have joined on the webinar, I hope they are all healthy and all their beloved and themselves are safe. It's just this unprecedented COVID-19 and its impact, which we have seen. I don't think anyone in the world, be it the individual, be it either our business, be it the company which we work for, has not been impacted. I think each one has had some or the other impact. Some industries have got large impact, as both Deepak and Kabir alluded upon. I mean, revenues have shrunk significantly, and while others, the impact may be a bit less. I come from an industry which is an agri-input industry. I'm the global CFO for UPL, and agri-inputs is, in most cases, in most countries across the globe, has been classified as essential commodity industry by most governments. So the impact to us has been a bit lower than other industries, but still, during this pandemic, we did see, with the lockdowns being announced by most countries, we did see impact on the logistics. We did see impact on some of the workers not being available, particularly the contract workers. So I don't think anyone has got, I would say, unhurt, or anyone has got not impacted with this pandemic. Indeed, I'll jump straight to the topic, which is on the financials. Clearly, preserving the capital, I think, is something which probably, as most of my friends or colleagues on this panel, being of the same, being all of them CFOs, it comes pretty naturally to us. But during these types of pandemic, I think the two very critical aspects are how do you manage your risk? How do you foresee some of the risk which could entail because of this pandemic? And how are you going to move in an agile manner to see that you protect the assets, protect the capital, protect your colleagues, protect your, your brand name, which you have earned over so many years, and see how do you take care of these things. And this, I think, is critical because, all those Excel sheets which we have worked on, all those budgeting, forecasting which has been done, everything goes for a toss, and you are probably, as I said, every day is a new day, and you need to prepare to manage the risk in these uncertain times. Having said that, I think also I would like to add here that it opens up really good ideas of innovation, and I'll share a few of them as I take you through how we have been managing, as particularly on the capital side, to begin with the financial capital. Yeah, I mean, there is so much of new ideas, so much of new ways of doing things, and sometimes it makes us look stupid that we didn't do these things in the past when things were normal. But anyway, as they say, when things are tough, when it's difficult times, you always come up with some real new ideas and new thoughts. I think from our side as a company, we ensured that we kept certain. I mean, as always, we try to keep things simple, but we made sure that we had more than adequate cash on our books. We wanted to keep enough cash to run our business, say, for the next full year, assuming that things don't change or the financial markets go difficult. So I must say that not only did we, to raise the capital, you obviously have to get your audited accounts, March being the year end, and we were right in the midst of the pandemic with lockdowns being announced. But we could see that, all our teams geared up, all working from home, could manage to get the audits done, could manage to, we raised capital, we raised bonds, the US bonds. We are one of the first companies to raise US dollar bond for a 10-year tenure. And we did it in a span of less than 5 days. So, it's just sometimes you think how productive can one get, sitting at home, not having access to all what you generally have in an office, but you still manage to do what you wanted to, or what you are almost forced to do it. So again, a strong believer that people come up with new ideas, new ways of working, and see how to do it. But yeah, we made sure that we had more than adequate capital funds on our balance sheet. Some of the other simple things which we did was we made sure that we don't, wherever there are overdue from the customers, we don't invoice to those. We were very clear. Let's not chase sales. Let's make sure we have enough, EBITDA and enough cash flows to run the business rather than just chasing the top line. So that's the other thing which we sort of focused on. Needless to mention, some of your growth plans, you start relooking at those as to whether you want to, step on the pedal or you want to just take it a bit easy rather than, investing in some of the projects which would take probably a couple of years before you see the cash flows coming from them. So a close eye on the, if I have to say, on the CapEx spend. And of course, some of the expenses, needless to mention, nobody traveled. So those were good savings which one could get. But at the same time, we ensure that, particularly consultants and other things, which as it is, they cannot come to the place of work. We sort of got into delaying their contracts or canceling their contracts. So these were some of the initiatives which we took to preserve the capital. I think the other two aspects which Kabir rightly alluded, which is on the human capital and the social capital, I think extremely critical, particularly in such times as, people, I also allude what Kabir said, we are all very fortunate, we have reasonably good sized houses so we can move around, but there are people, and maybe my own fellow colleagues, not everybody has these sort of facilities, and therefore working from home gets very challenging. So, one thing which we did is we have every week a call, we have a coffee meeting every week, and we also being a global company, we engage with our all the global finance people around the world, once in a fortnight. All these which we are doing once in a month, but we sort of stepped up on the communication, particularly during these times, and I think it's really helping because some of the colleagues who don't have the emotional support or have certain challenges at home, were able to share these things with us. And as a corporate, we also took some initiatives to see how we could support them during these difficult times. So clearly, I would say very, very important to keep engaging with your colleagues, with your peer group, with others in the organization. On the social capital, needless to mention, I think as an organization, we being in the pesticide industry, we could easily turn a couple of our formulation lines into making sanitizers. But again, we didn't make them for selling. We provided them free to pretty much all the, I would say the districts or all the places, towns where we have our manufacturing plants. Those were provided. We also undertook some contract spraying. That's again a very innovation thing. We use sprayers to spray on the farms. And then one of the guys came up with this idea, hey, why can't we use this to spray the streets? So we had these sprayers which were being deployed and pulled out from the farm. Fortunately, it is not sowing season in India. So we pulled out these sprayers from the farms and we used them to spray several of the municipalities and hospitals and other things. So very important to do these things to, it's your time to give back to the society. And I think these are times if you don't come ahead, I probably feel that, I would say it's not, all what we say about our branding and everything has little meaning if you don't come up and live up to these sort of social engagements during these difficult times. So with this, I will hand it back to Kabir. Thank you very much for joining us. And yeah, we'll be around to take my questions. Thank you.
Harshal, why don't you give me your top of mind?
Thank you, Anand. Thanks, hey, everyone. What I'll do is start from the macro, then zoom on to Sequoia, Sequoia, US, India, China, and then zoom in a bit on what we are doing as a company at Sequoia ourselves. And then, the larger 200 plus startups that we've invested in and how each one is tackling it, right? So, I mean, from a macro standpoint, it is unfortunate that people like Larry Brilliant and Anand Taleb actually predicted way back in 2006. And for folks who are interested, look up Larry Brilliant's 2006 TED Talk that, he actually asked for $100 million to fight a pandemic, okay? I mean, the irony of life is the person who invented fire was burned, right? So that's kind of the irony we are living with in the current world. And all of you know that the sheer globalization is how one, it's not a 100-ton alien that's fighting us, but it's a micron-based virus, right? I mean, unimaginable, that has held us captive, like more than 8 billion people captive in the world, for the last 3 months. Okay, so this indeed is a war. I mean, for all of you who watched, Independence Day or whatever sci-fi movies saying this indeed is a war, but we really need to play it out in a very different manner, right? I mean, this so much so is a war that any able person, who is of the right age and the right strength should be out on streets. And when my colleague Manas speaks about the challenges that doctors and people are going through, I think, I mean, if ever there was a time to give back to society, it is right here and right now. Okay, coming to Sequoia, globally, like you've seen, we would be one of the first firms that came out as early as in the first week of March on the Black Swan memo. Again, we, at Sequoia, we are grateful to have the benefit of tribal knowledge over the last 50 years, have seen many crises, from 70s to 80s to 90s, and the tribal knowledge is passed on. Simple basic things, that we told our founders to do: raise the rounds, get cash in. CFO doesn't mean chief financial officer, it means cash flow from operations. So get everything right and make sure that you're set for the next 2 years, right? And the focus for most of our companies, if not all, has transitioned from GMV, which is gross merchandise value, to GM, which is gross margin, right? I mean, the world is changing and everybody focusing, like Anand said, on gross margin, on cash flow, etc., as compared to the vanity metrics, if you will, in terms of growth. And that's the right time. If you asked me 5 years ago, when growth, where you had to grow exponentially, maybe GMV was a right metric, but now it is gross margin, at least for the next couple of years, right? Specifically at Sequoia, and at Sequoia India, we are extremely proud and grateful that we are one of the key partners at a fund called ACT, or Action COVID Fund. You can look that up on actgrants.in. It's a group of venture firms and founders that have set up a very tiny 100 crore fund to provide monies to scalable ideas, just like how we do investments, not an immediate band-aid or a quick fix, but to scalable ideas, to give you some, and there are about 100 volunteers across all of these firms, Axel, Cherate, across all of these firms working throughout day and night in addition to their day jobs. We've given grants to companies like MyLabs, which was the first one to, we're giving grants to oxygenators. And as we speak, we are thinking of creating a systems think tank. But I think what is missing right now, everybody's seeing what's the problem today. Nobody's telling us what's the problem 5 days later or 7 days later, right? So that's, what we are doing on the social side. Specifically for our company at Sequoia India, and this is India, Southeast Asia, Singapore, we've been extremely flexible with people and said, you can work from home as long as you like. Absolutely no hang-ups. We know the situations and we know how people work in India, right? With kids, with travel restrictions, with public transport, etc. So everybody can work from home. In fact, we've gone, a step beyond and allowed a particular limit for setting up a work office, because most of us after a month would realize we would have back problems and neck problems because our homes are just not designed to work, right? And these are the small things that really matter for people. Okay, like Anand mentioned, we've got more than twice weekly check-ins with each and every member so that we cover everyone. And we go on the principle of more is less, because it doesn't matter, right? You should intrude, where all of us are seeing each other on these tiny Zoom screens. So, we should check in as much as we can, because more is less. And last, but the most important principle that we've worked with for all our employees and founders and their teams is families first. So, in case anyone has any problem, right, during the day, and everybody's now working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, if you need to take time off, Friday evening is equal to Monday morning, and any time in between. So just, let the team know that you are out for 3 hours, no judgments, no questions asked. And that is the, the talk that the firm is walking. And I can vouch for that for the last, 3 months. Coming back, to brass tacks, right? And I'm sure this is going to be repeated 100 times, like cash flow, cash is king. Unit economics also had already become the buzzword pre-COVID, where people were focusing on profitability. And for those conventional folks that were wondering what's happening, the reality actually, took a turn back and said, okay, now everybody's focusing on business. We are focused on our startups having cash runway for 2+ years, try and reskill. We've, the ability to lay people off or the request to lay people off is zero eyes. We've been telling all our startups to rescale and work with all the people, because this is a humanitarian crisis, and to lay somebody off at this time is the worst possible thing. Okay. And the good news, right? On the softer side, we spend as much time. I have spent more time with my kid than I could have ever imagined in my whole life. The earth is a lot cleaner. I'm in Bangalore, and that 6 a.m. flights and the long drive to the airport, it takes more time to get to the airport than to Bombay, right? All of that is gone. Life is a lot green. I can breathe fresh air. I can get time for yoga at home, which is awesome. But we have actually started seeing a lot of green shoots in the last month, because all of us on the Zoom call today have an inherent belief in humankind to be resilient and fight it out. Okay, and we are actually seeing that come through a lot earlier. To give you some stats, right? 50 to 60. More than 3/4 of our companies are already at 50 to 60% of pre-COVID levels, give or take, right? So it is a phenomenal reinstatement of our belief in overall humankind, and that's the activity I'm sure you'll see everywhere. Not only true for VC or Sequoia companies, right? So like some of our folks, some of our partners who've seen this a long time says the best companies get created. Google, PayPal, were created after the dot-com bust. We invested in WhatsApp, like, a couple of years down the, the global financial crisis, and the list can go on, right? So the good news is the best in business is at your level today, and if you believe that you have that in you, you can be the next big what in the industry. So on that happy note, I'll hand over. Thank you. Thank you.
Manas, go on.
Well, thank you, Anand. Thank you, Harshal, Kabir, and Deepak. And good morning to everybody who is participating today all over the, I think, country. Saturday, almost afternoon now. And I hope that you are all awake, seeing our probably a little unclean or unshaven faces for sure. Two things. I think majority of my co-panelists has already talked about the things which probably there is no point of repeating it again. It's well laid out. So I will not repeat for sake of repetition. I will not do that. What I will talk about today for next 3.5 minutes is probably after 3 months of lockdown, what we are seeing than what we have seen in the March 25th, when we came back from office and say, oh, good Lord, we may not be able to go to office for next couple of days, maybe couple of weeks. I still remember on that particular day, my chairman called me up and said that Manas, it seems to be at least 2 to 3 months we will be out of action from the office setup. Coincidentally, it happened to be the same. So when it started in sometime of March, trust me, we sat down in our own offices, and what we thought is that it's not a financial crisis. It's absolutely a human crisis. Point number 2, we realized that it will be multi-quarter, maybe more than a financial year. Number 3, we realized that the way we operate today will go for sure a change maybe in coming months. And number 4, which is very important, is that what we always thought a safe haven may not be a safe haven tomorrow. Whatever it is, I'm from pharma and healthcare. My industry can be a little different, maybe a little more fortunate today than many other industries, but that's inconsequential. As a world race, as a human race, it is something which is completely changing. So in that particular scenario, when we felt that we don't know whether we have at a start of a pandemic or we are at the end of the tunnel, which we were not knowing, not only us from OCARD or from pharma industry per se, even globally the experts didn't know that where we are in the tunnel of darkness. Are we at the beginning of the tunnel, middle of the tunnel, or end of the tunnel? We didn't know. So what to do? I will now talk about for a couple of minutes only for what we did, and then come back to the situation today, that what we did, whether that was effective or not. So under the sun, you take a call, could be looking incorrect or correct, but when the sun sets in, always the shadows are longer. So it can be very different. So what we did is that we made sure that as an organization, we divided this entire scenario in 3 buckets. We call it as respond. First, I repeat, respond. This is 3 R's: resolve and restore. So for the initial few weeks, it was only responding. And actually, very frankly speaking, in OCARD, it was driven by finance. And I'm very happy that my entire team actually helped us in getting there. So when we say as respond, means we didn't know what is happening. When you see a patient in the emergency, the doctor doesn't know what is really there. He only guesses based on certain symptomatic actions. So, and then gets into the resolution process where all other checks comes in, or the verification or other checks and balances comes in. So what we did is that we said, okay, respond to the situation based on the facts and figures which we have. And when we say respond, we talked about the responsiveness, not the response. We talked about an agility and responsiveness in the situation. When we talk about responsiveness in the situation, we defined it in two parameters. One, everybody talked about, cash is king. Make sure liquidity is available. Point number two, we talked about is that make sure all the processes, regulatory, compliance, alternatives, whatever processes, the digital are working well. Those are the backbone. Now, these are the two things which we try to do. Productivity is probably was the last thing at that particular moment, because you didn't know whether supply chain will be working for next couple of months, whether you didn't know whether people will come back to the factory to work. We didn't know, but that will be probably a byproduct. We try to do that. And while we are responding and making a responsiveness, we also created a situation which we called as resolve. So resolve means what we do in this particular scenario. Somebody talked about, I think Anand talked about raising money. I think Harshal talked about, making sure that the people are working together. We did the same thing. We became compassionate. All my team, I never went back and told them, come back by EOD. I hate that word, that when you send somebody saying that completed, come back by EOD, that this is your work. We never said that. The reason we never said that is that right now, rather than the command control and objectivity of the function is more important, rather than the command control. Compassionate becoming probably the buzzword. And last, which we are seeing right now, is the restoration. So 3 months down the line, when I look back, I see a responsiveness, I see a resolution process, which we have taken in 3 months for almost 12 weeks now, is actually working well. So what is actually working well is that, I think Harshal talked about more is less. Actually, this is our buzzword in OCAD, more is always a less. So we decided that we will not get into something which is obnoxiously avoided. So fixed cost versus variable, look into that. Look into every cost from its objectivity, not by just because of what we need. Our needs were defined pre-COVID area. Today, the post-COVID area, our needs to be redefined. So we looked into, we cut down, okay, I will not say it's cost as a cut down. We optimized cost hugely. If you see some of our results and the presentations, our cost optimization work model really went well. We looked into which are those products which we cannot anymore invest into on the R&D or product launches. We demarcated, somebody said about gross contribution and gross margin. We demarcated products or businesses between gross margin and high gross margin and low gross margin. We remained focused on that. So 3 months down the line, when I look back of all the uncertainty, what we started in today, trust me, I'm extremely hopeful that tomorrow when we come back to the office, we will be much more leaner, much more agile, and probably much more effective. A beautiful word quoted from HBR. The Harvard Business Review said that social distancing is a bad word. You must ensure that you get into a distancing which is not to be considered as an isolation. The social isolation is different. So as a finance professional, we must identify that where from we need to be distancing, and that should not come into a process of isolation. We will talk about it a little later. I generally do not like to speak again and again and for a monologue. So I will hand it over to Kabir again for my next co-panelist, and take care from there for the questions and other answers later on. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience here.
That was really lovely. I'm going to copy with pride the 3R model, that you mentioned, Manas. It's inspiring. Nitin, over to you.
Yeah, so I agree. So good morning all, and whoever attendees are, I would wish health for them and be safe. I would also like to start, and I will get catch what Manas was saying. We are quite privileged. Some of the when you see the COVID warriors on the road, and I personally, when I look at doctors, nurses, even we might be saying few things about the government, how they are managing it, but its life is really difficult over there. So with a somber note, so I represent an industry which was first to shut down, And I was just counting, we have completed 100 days of shutdown. And probably we will be the last one to open. So even though we do consider ourselves now as a safest place, much safer than, to your residents. And that's how we have been welcoming all our consumers wherever we are. Our malls are open, especially in Baroda, Bangalore, and Hyderabad. So on the macro part, this industry, retail industry, represents around more than 10% of India's GDP. I don't want to get into numbers, but just to give you an analogy that the entire industry was there for a complete shutdown. I'm hearing a hello. Yeah, so from a business model perspective, our only source of inflows are rentals. We don't have any other inflows. We are not on e-commerce. We are not on OTT, and we don't have, we just started the home deliveries of food. Other than that, we don't have any source of, income. For last 3 months, I would say we were complete shutdown. So no sources of income. Whatever we had, we preserved, each and every drop of it. We went to basics. So I just recall the last week of March. There was one team who were completely on advocacies. We were representing to the governments. We were representing to IRDAs of the world. We were representing to RBI. We were representing to the local government, state government, ministries, and of course, the highest office in the country. And I must confess that there was a situation which was more desperate, and there was chaos, there was confusion, and we have been asking every sort of help from all all areas where we could get help to. So when we went to the government, we were asking about whether we can get a one-time restructuring of the loans. We are capital intensive industry. We have huge cost in terms of interest. We have huge equipment maintenance costs. We manage big assets. When you come to our assets, they're huge. The cost of maintaining air conditioning itself is huge. We have huge manpower costs. We have huge property taxes. So we went to the government and to all the associations where we could kind of ask waivers in terms of waivers in terms of fixed costs, in the property taxes, electricity duty. We ask for liquidity support from the government, whether we can get some immediate working capital, 15%, 20%, whatever we can get, at least to, make sure that the business is lubricated. There were huge costs in terms of workmen, and then we went to the government and asked job subsidies, with some amount of 50% of minimum wages could have been given to the workmen or to us, so that we can actually feed them. And then we went to the insurance company. There were huge premiums we paid for our noses for loss of profits, unfortunately. So all the doors, frankly, if you ask me, after 2 months of day and night of more than 200 representations, I don't see there was enough at the light tunnel, at the end of the tunnel. But the best part of the second team, we already started looking inside, and whatever we had, we said, let's share the pain. And the sharing of pain went to the vendors, to employees, ourselves, everybody. And then we said that this is the time where we should stand up and collaborate. The best part was we had good relationship with our vendors, and barring the MSMEs where we thought that they might need cash, we released some of the immediate payments. And then slowly we started putting some processes around cash, and these are all basics. I remember my fellow panelists, we have around more than 20 plus years of experience. I remember those days when we during our articleship times in chartered, we used to look at our cash vouchers and cash flows, and that was the area where we went into, and all the senior professionals, including my team, we went and we looked at practically every line item of cash, whatever we are paying. So and we, whatever our co-panelists said, deferred capex, shut down the projects which we don't need, remove the marketing costs at present, Then we started looking at innovative ways of, how can we reduce the cash over there, outflows. We read the contracts and we came up with the idea of, AMCs can be shifted. We shifted some of the annual maintenance contracts. We renegotiated, most of the annual maintenance contracts. We renegotiated with all the consultants and the retainers. So practically all cost line items were challenged inside. It was kind of a commander role, I would say, where the entire finance team played during that time. And then the entire business team supported us a lot. Our procurement teams went out and we changed some of the vendors who didn't wanted to, adjust with us. So harsh time, harsher stance. But I would say I remember, the title of Robert Schuller book, Tough Times Never Last, and Tough Peoples Do. So we were really tough during that time. And we really, then the third team was actually working on the financing bit. We were looking at getting some working capital loans. So we got few funds from banks due to our better relationship. We were also privileged to have lower net debts, because we have been there in the market for more than 7+ years. So our net debts were lower. So we were a little luckier than the other industry. So far, some of the team members came up with very innovative ideas, and I would just want to put one or two. Now, the insurance premiums, you normally pay upfront. You don't go and beyond the last due dates. One of the team members went into the insurance policy and said, "Boss, there is one clause where we can, give a bank guarantee to the bank and defer this payment by 60 days." And it's, those 60 days were looking so enchanting for me, even for a small amount. I don't say it's a small amount, because every rupee was counting at that point of time. So I'm sorry, I'm getting a little granular, because I want to recall every single day, which I spent in last 90 days. I can write a book on this after, we are through with this lockdown. So quite a few challenging stuff. To give you to my co-panelists and the attendees here, as a group, we never went for work from home. We have been debating internally for long. There have been challenges. I come from an MNC background of more than 11-12 years. I was in BP. I was in VF Corporation for more than 10 years. So I was used to work from home culture. And there has been an internal challenge with, teams here, which has never been a culture. I would say we went ahead and we tested work from home. And the best part was, as soon as we were testing work from home, the lockdown started. So I think we were ahead, at least on that curve. And I was personally surprised by the resilience of the group. Frankly, if you ask me, somebody who has not done work from home, an entire staff is working from home, and touch wood, I don't see a major work getting stalled or payment getting held or any business getting stalled during that time. So so that was from a social part of it. I think our first priority was to make sure that we keep our human resources intact. As our co-panelists said, families were the priority. We spoke to all the entire team members. So the entire team was knit on one WhatsApp group. So there was one WhatsApp group which was formed. So we had weekly houses. We had fun. Normally what happens during this time, and I have personally also seen that if one day you don't get calls from any of your colleagues, you feel isolated. And sometimes you feel whether you are really needed in that organization. And those workplaces give you that confidence that you are respected as an individual or a professional in your organization. But working from home actually removes that disparity, and leadership comes in this place. And I'm proud to say that in our group, leaders stood up. They were resilient, though there was internal factions as well. We have never seen this kind of situation. So from that perspective, I would say there was a test of leadership, and we came strongly out of it. Now my biggest spend, which is again I catch from what Manas was saying, the restoration cost. So I'm Now we are spending a lot on welcoming our consumers. And last 1 month we have made our places safe. So as you all go out and visit our malls wherever they are open, I would say they are much safer than the housing societies or the marketing areas where you go out, or the vegetable mandis, or even I would say your residence as well. So please venture out and see how safe we are. And that's a request we have been making to the governments also, so at least start the consumption cycle once again. So on that note, I would not take more time, and as we go along, maybe give your answers. Over to you, Kabir.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nitin. Before I pass on to Sanjay, I see a lot of participants raising hands. Given the format that we have, may I request you, if you have any questions, put it into the Q&A panel. I will have a look at the questions and then decide, how to go about answering your questions and which panelists to pose them to. So we probably may not have the ability to take live questions. So please try and put your questions into the Q&A panel. Sanjay, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone and their loved ones are hale and hearty. And thanks, Anand, Harshal, Manas, and Nitin for making my job easy after such a beautiful thoughts and the action what you have done. Kabir, what I will do, as we have agreed that I will cover more in this part, I will cover more of the industry and what as a mother dairy we have done. And in the next part, what you take, we will take the financial, human, and the social capital.
Yeah.
Okay. I am representing the mother dairy. I'm the group CFO of the mother dairy, which is almost about $1.5 billion company. There has been a mixed impact on the dairy industry. The fresh milk sales saw a decline of about 10 to 12%, mainly due to the institutional and the horeca, that is the hotel, restaurant, and the catering segment, and the tea vendors, which is a common thing on the roads here. The household consumption, we saw increase due to the people at home throughout the day and enjoying with their families, the food and the work also. The milk availability, which normally in the summers is a challenge. And we were facing, before the COVID, we were seeing that we might face some challenges in the milk availability and the prices might go up. But thanks to, we had a good availability because a lot of small players were not buying the milk from the people. And we being a social organization also, we were buying whatever was available and we helped the farmers that way. Few of our categories like butter, cheese, ghee, and paneer saw a growth of about 20 to 50%. One of the segment, as Deepak mentioned earlier, the ice cream segment saw a decline of about 70 to 80%, mainly due to the close of retail stores, all the schools which help in impulse buying, and the non-plying of the vending carts. I know people based out of Delhi would appreciate. We have about 7,000 carts plying on the roads, and which were not on the roads during this time. Our category team did a lot of things. They made a lot of WhatsApp group to deliver, along with some radio channels. We went to the ice cream cake. We celebrated birthdays of the people on the radio channels and gave them the ice cream cakes at their homes. People were very happy. But still, this could not help much. We were still down by about 70%. Yeah. The other channel which got affected in our company was the bulk sales in oil and the ghee, which is about 15 liters pack, and ice cream, the gallons, due to no marriages, functions, and closure of all the sweets and snack shops. And in the initial days, we faced certain challenges due to labor issues, the packing material, which we just keep for the just in time, which was earlier not made essential services, but on representation, the packing material was also brought into essential services, and we were lucky to get the value chain running. What we have observed, Kabir, in this new trends observed during COVID and the consumer behavior and the channel shift, what we have seen, the demand for immunity products is getting a thing coming up in a big way, and riding the bandwagon, we also crashed our new product development cycle from about 3 to 4 months to just about 5 weeks, and we were able to launch this Haldi milk within 1 month. And also there are 4 to 5 weeks and a lot of new products of the immunity which are in the pipeline. One more trend what we saw is the modern retail sales, which was a big thing in our business due to social distancing and closure of stores in the mall and the standalone stores of Reliance Retail, More, Future, and decline in footfall due to social distancing. we found that e-commerce is taking a thing. It has come as a black swan even for the e-commerce industry, which is gaining footfalls, foot clicks in our company. Due to fear of contagion, the fear of consumer towards the package, open goods, loose goods, the packaged products like paneer and packaged sweets are gaining a momentum. And we are also strengthening our sweet portfolio. We already have a launch rasgullas, gulab jamuns, frozen rasmalais for the people, and there are a lot of other products in the pipeline. One more thing that we saw is the small is big. As a lot of people mentioned that there are a lot of cuts, salary cuts, and the people take home salaries are reduced. The value for money products is increasing, and we already have a lot of products in the range of 10 to 20 rupees. And we have recently launched even a cone, which used to be 40, 50 rupees. We have launched an ice cream cone in the range of 10 rupees, at the rate of 10 rupees. We see industry as a bleak future for the large volume catering, both up in the sky and also on the grounds, because of a lot of marriages and all those things not happening and gatherings not being there. But more trend what we have seen and which have helped and what have helped all the industries is moving from the traditional marketing to digital marketing. In the last 3 months, we were able to bring back digital marketing. We were able to bring back the Indian Ocean back on our digital route. We were able to bring back the Jalebi kid of 90s Dhara back in action. And what we feel also more is the food safety will be concerned, and brands, the packaged goods and the brands will carry a premium. What helped Mother Dairy, let me cover on the Mother Dairy front, is for the industry coverage. What helped Mother Dairy to survive and thrive? We were able to be almost doing about 80 to 90% of our turnovers, almost about 800 to 900 crores every month. We have a diversified portfolio of fresh milk, value-added dairy products like curd, charch, butter, cheese. We have a range of filtered oils and refined oils, ghee, fresh fruits and vegetables, frozen peas and snacks, and B2B, pulp business. The mazas and all those things, cokes, and they use all the mango pulps and banana pulps produced by the Mother Dairy. I don't know how many people know that. Yeah. We were there with our consumers from dawn to dusk and part of their life from throughout the day. Not sure how many people know that apart from Mother Dairy brand, we also have 2 more brands like Dhara and the Safal. The kids of 90s would know the Dhara Dhara jingle, Dhara Dhara Shuddh Dhara, and also the Safal, the pioneers of the frozen peas. As most of the retail stores were closed, shops were closed, we were lucky that we were in this COVID, we had our own 1,500 outlets run by the franchises in NCR, and they were giving uninterrupted supplies to the people from morning 5 to 9 o'clock in the night. During this period, when there were a lot of, we opened more than 50 to 60 kiosks in housing societies and also helped people in the red zone and containment zones for the ease of consumers. And we feel that this action would go a long way and people will remember Mother Dairy for that. We operate on the model of C2C, that's cow to consumer and farm to folk, to serve our farmers and rural India, which helped us in uninterrupted supplies of milk and vegetables to the country. In the beginning of the lockdown, we saw some in the fresh milk and the fruit and vegetables. Initially, we saw a huge upswings on certain days due to panic buying and stocking by the people. But when the people saw our stores opening every morning at 5, there were no doubts in the people that they need to stock now. What we thought in this, after the post-COVID, a lot of case studies would be written. And we wanted that we should be having an inspiring case study for people to write and read. With this, I hand over to Kabir. Thank you for being part of this.
Thanks a lot, Sanjay. Wow, it's absolutely been mind-boggling as I listened to all 5 of you. There is, it didn't feel like I was listening to CFOs at all, because there was not a single word of accounting, reconciliation, trial balance that I actually heard. What I heard was business. What I heard was consumers. What I heard was volatility. What I heard was challenging almost every line. Yeah. And I probably, maybe this is, going kind of redundant, but I would still say it. Finance is the only function which probably has the end-to-end visibility of the business apart from the CEO. Yeah. And therefore, this is the moment, for the finance function to actually rise up, and deliver. And I would encourage the panelists to actually look at the Q&A. So we will try and take one question from me, and then one question we can go from the audience as well, so that we keep it as interactive. And I'll try and post them to you. The first thing that I would actually start off is I've heard sales is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is reality. Yeah, that is coming to fore really now. And I've heard all of you talk about how you actually prioritize cash. I keep saying this in my past life, that there are many people in the organization who look at P&L. Many people, yeah. So even if finance takes the eye off the ball on P&L, that there is the business, there's marketing, there is sales, there's general management, guys who actually probably look at the P&L and then will try and correct course. But there's nobody else who looks at balance sheet. Yeah, and the only function which actually looks at balance sheet is finance. In times of crisis, it is not the profitable companies that survive; it's the liquid companies that actually survive. Yeah. So I'm just going to ask both Anand and Manas to talk about, because around this time they've probably looked at cash and taken one step forward, and ensure that they could bolster. Nitin already gave examples that he went to the granular level, and looked at if I can replace a payment with a guarantee. Yeah, very, very smart. And I would encourage the audience to take these tips, yeah, to go back, because these are very, very operational tips and and nuggets of wisdom, coming out from here. But I would like to ask Anand and Manas to talk about what they did, during this time to actually do a fundraise and also an M&A deal. So it'll be interesting for the audience to know, to say that just because we are locked down doesn't mean we need to have business as a standstill. Anand, Manas, both to you.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Kabir. I think at UPL, and I think I personally also always believe that whenever there's adversity, there are a lot of opportunities, and you can only take advantage of opportunities if you have cash. So while cash may be looked also as a surviving kit, but it also is, if you have adequate cash, you can, take advantages of the opportunities which come by. And therefore, for us, we are a growth-oriented company. Of course, during such adversities, as a CFO, one of my critical things is to ensure that it remains profitable and there's enough cash generation. But at the same time, it's important to have cash on the balance sheet, so that it's like this. I mean, again, some of these are very very cliche statements. When you want cash, there is nobody to give you, lenders. But when you don't need, you always have a queue of people willing to come and lend to you. And I think being agile is something which is very critical, particularly in such type of global pandemics, because as I think Manas pointed out, we don't know whether it's 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, or how long this will continue. So it's always good to stack up cash and keep it. And fortunately, we are a global company. We're headquartered out of, I would say we are a MNC with a headquarters in India. We have access to global fundraising. And, with today interest rates, Eurozone has negative interest rates, negative LIBOR, US is very low. Cost of fund is not that high for us. So we are also an investment grade company, one of the few from India. So, with cost of funding at 2% or 3%, I think it was no brainer, but to make sure you amass enough cash. I'll stop here. I'll hand over to Manas. I'm sure he has a few more things to add. Over to you, Manas.
Thank you, Anand. Before I talk about my experience during these 3 months, and quite encouraging and probably very positive to each of the listener, I would also like to ask this entire audience to go back and think that whether cash is the king, why do you need cash? So, of course, I'm not debating that the cash is king. I'm not at all debating. Cash is certainly king. But which king? Is it an operating king? Is an ownership king? Or it's something, a paranoid of a authoritative king? So that one, in case somebody can really look at, the cash probably is needed only when, I think Kabir has very rightly pointed out, when you do not look at the balance sheet. profit and loss account is 100% an illusion. The balance sheet, all the current assets and liabilities that we are sitting on the balance sheet, all the paraphernalia of capexes which could have been avoided in the past when you had a lot of cash, you pumped into the business for generating additional capacity, and now you know that you don't need them anymore. Or alternately, you have pumped into investments in so-called new businesses or so-called new ventures. I think it creates a trouble on the cash. So if somebody's balance sheet is heavily skewed towards the capital assets, skewed towards the investment, and of course for that there is an obligation on the liability side of the balance sheet, there will be a cash crunch. Coincidentally, it's not a COVID situation, but I would like to share with all my panelists as well as all the listeners today is that almost 1.5 years back, we started an action which we called is a net working capital, which should be an X percentage of sales, right? I'm not divulging what percentage of that. We are also, like Anand is a global organization. I'm a global CFO headquartered in Mumbai, handling from US to Australia. So there are 21 countries where we have our presences, our R&D centers, our manufacturing locations, our distribution locations. And every country has different kinds of businesses, right? And don't forget that we are highly regulated industry. So we looked into the net working capital. And when I say net working capital, I'm a firm believer that you can really in today's world work without a capital employed into the business in the form of working capital. That does not necessarily mean that you stop paying to the creditors. I'm not saying that. But how you define, one defines the debtors, one defines the inventory level, both at the primary and the secondary level, somebody has to keep. And of course, how to finance them. There can be situation and available finance, which Anand was talking about, which are even much cheaper than the very, very standardized financing models of raising money, like a factoring, like a reverse factoring, like probably in India, you can get into all your imports, convert it into an SBLC for an extended period of more than 365 days with a marginal cost, which is probably insignificant. It will be less than 2% for sure of majority of us who are sitting here and who are the listeners. So without getting into that granularity, my take on the cash is king is that let us first go back to the balance sheet, look at where my cash is stuck. That is what is more important. And the second part, what I would sincerely encourage everybody to look at, what is that cash generation to EBITDA? Are you a 80% plus of your EBITDA is generating into a cash? You are in safe hands. Otherwise, you are investing or plowing back money into the business to sustain the business. That may not be very long, unless otherwise you are into an infrastructure or that kind of a long gestation period. I'm not generalizing it, but companies like us, FMCG, companies like pharma, companies like probably some other consumer-driven organization. Cash as king may be a connotation, but the important part is how I define that cash. So loans and advances, all security deposits, all the debit balances of your balance sheet on the asset side, and all corresponding capital employed, please look into, probably you have a different fee. While just on one more moment, during this 3 months of lockdown, we also did surprisingly a very large scale M&A, sitting at home, working for late nights without knowing what time of the night. And I think 6-7 of us in the team, we were closing the deal, unbelievable, unprecedented time. But at the end of the day, when I see every day in the morning, the cash balance in the balance sheet looks fabulous. It gives a feel like, okay, I'm a tea connoisseur. My morning cup of tea, not the coffee. And it's really, really aromatic to see that. 3 months back, it was not there in the balance sheet, and I was really worried. At that time, it used to take like a steroid to boost it up. Today, it's an aromatic tea. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Manas. I'm going to take some question from the audience. Great question from Kunal. I'm going to merge the question from Kunal and Vikas. The question, Sanjay, I'm going to pose to you is, while everyone is trying to do best for their organization, what step is finance taking for its vendors? I think it's a great question. Merging with Vikas, what is your take on MSMEs? Because I'm just, merging vendors and MSMEs here who have struggled with cash flow. How do they deal with this crisis? And Mother Dairy, since you have a large amount of vendors, you've been up and running 80-90% of your business at this point in time. How did you manage your ecosystem, your vendors, and people who are dependent on you who had cash flow crisis? Sanjay?
Basically, if you see, as I mentioned, we are C2C and farm to fork company. Like most of the suppliers to us are the farmers, and we make payments every 7 days to them, and all the farmers also every 10 days. So we ensured that we bought the milk from them, and we ensured that we made the payment on timely payment to them at the best rates possible, as per the market rates. So we ensured that not even a single day delay was there. So almost we were giving to the farmers back to the about 300 to 400 crores in the market every month to the villagers and everyone, and to the suppliers, all payments were made on time. Not even a single payments were delayed. So we were lucky that we were having the cash flows, and we have a short conversion cycle. We buy the milk, and within 2 or 3 days we are able to sell it, and our 70 to 80% sales are on the cash, other than some institutional and Horeca segments. So our cash conversion cycle is good. As Manas mentioned, sometimes why do you need more cash to run the business? If you are efficient conversion cycle, then your value chain is running fine. Yeah, I agree to that. Yeah. So we were able to do this very efficiently and pay all the vendors on time, and also some vendors who require these things. In case of vendors, we have tied up with the banks, and we are ensuring that they get the cheaper credit through banks. Yeah, we have tied up with the trades. We have done the trades tie up, and we are getting them the funds to the trades network. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks a lot, Sanjay. I would like to reiterate that point to most, large corporates. That's why I've actually said, so you have access to banks, you have access to financial institutions, you've had, relationships. Those, MSMEs don't. And I think this is the time to take care of your extended ecosystem. So make those connections and ensure that they have access to funds. Cheap or otherwise is not the conversation. First, they have to have access to funds. And I think what Sanjay said is really great.
I would also like to add, sorry, Kabir,
yeah,
on the MSME part, since we have been dealing with, many of the MSMEs. So my advice, and since there was a very specific question on how they will manage their part, I think one thing which MSMEs should do is to look at their business models very closely. Secondly, many of the companies have credit financing, and as rightly Sanjay said, they have this tie-up with banks. I would also encourage them to look at, some of the discounting facilities which the companies offer. Go back to the companies or go back to the employers and ask them, whether they have this credit facility where there is a discounting of invoices happening. Third thing is, many of the MSMEs are not very digitally savvy. I would tell them to please get yourself, making more digital savvy, start adopting alternate, UPIs, Paytms, and start learning how, you can reach out to your consumers if they have a business which is more B2C, digitally, even if they are under lockdown. So just, few words I just wanted to add here.
No, that's great, Nitin. I have another question which I want just Harshal and Nitin both to answer, because from different vantage points. In fact, every panel member can answer this because it's a very generic question. How does the panel see the finance as a profession evolve from this crisis? So Harshal, you can go from a view, because you have a 200 plus startups that you actually, funded and you see a common thread. And Nitin, because, you've been kind of seriously impacted of all the 5 CFOs here. You've been kind of seriously impacted, and therefore you've questioned every gospel and I would say, evolved as a function. So you can talk from, experience. So both of you, please. Harshal first.
Yeah, generally finance conventionally has been, if somebody shouts, there is a big challenge, and if the challenge goes over, right, nobody sees it, then that hero never gets recognized, right? Because he predicted that we are going to lose 100 crores, versus a salesman who's going to build 10 crores. So the 100 crore escape, which were saved will never get seen. But now I think now is the time, right? I mean, if ever there was a time to blow out of the glass wall and come out, you know, as a hero, now is the time for the finance guys, and it's really showing because they understand. I think, you know, and this is a generic comment. What most finance professionals lack, you know, and maybe including me, right, is the art of storytelling. You know, and again, I mean, it might sound very counterintuitive. I mean, what are we discussing this, right, on the numbers panel? But, you know, the finance guy has the most intellect, the most perspective, and the most depth about the business, right? He can see from a CEO to a peon. He can see from a salesman, you know, to an accountant, and he can see everything, right? But the art of storytelling is largely missing, and which is why, you know, the trees gets whatever, you miss the trees for the woods, etc., right? If the finance profession can get to 20% efficiency on storytelling, and maybe, you know, reduce that 20% efficiency on something else, right, and which we want, the detailing, the finesse, the focus, etc., I think, you know, that would take us to the next orbit. And I think that should be the focus, right? And when I say storytelling, it includes all the softer parts, the human capital, the trust, etc., etc. I mean, so on and so forth. And I mean, you know, just one example that one of our companies did to get to, you know, the ground realities, MSME vendors, you know, they had 1 lakh a month outload because they took a lot of cars. Behind every MSME, behind every vendor, there is a person, right? So what they did was actually they hired the person as an office help, even though there was no office, at like 1/4 the cost, made sure that he had, you know, bread butter to keep his household running. And the MNC, you know, whoever the vendor, which was an MNC or could do whatever, but they made sure that the people who would work for them for the last 10 years, 11 years, you know, get fed and humanitarian. So that I really like. I mean, it achieved both the outcomes, right? So with that, over to you, Nitin.
Nitin, you're mute.
So I will be a little bit prescriptive, you know, allow me 2 minutes. Since, you know, there are a few things which, you know, we have been doing, you know, as a finance professional. And I just want to reiterate. So it's nothing new upfront, but a few of the things which we have been doing, I just want to refresh it on. So you know, while Harshal was talking, I just noted few of the points which, you know, I have got in last 3 months. First is the definition of a good cost and a bad cost. You know, while we all fight for, you know, wastages and all, it's important for us to define what is a good cost and a bad cost. And, you know, every time when I talk to my team, I tell them that, look, if you're spending 1 rupee, how is consumer getting benefit out of it? So how is, you know, some one consumer walking in my mall will get a benefit from this cost? I think that's important. You must understand your cost should have a direct or an indirect effect on the consumers. Second is get to your basics. Your basics should be right. And as a finance professional, you can't be on a 60,000 square feet and then you know, just going across and then taking. I agree with Harshal on the story part of it, but I think they have to go down and understand what are there in details. If there's a contract to read, please make sure that you read every line of it. And in last 3 months, there was one point, you know, where my business had told me that, you know, did you went through this line? And I was like so embarrassed. I said, as a finance professional, you know, we must go and find out, you know, what's there in the detail. Because that's the privilege we have. You know, you get all the papers. One invoice coming to you, you have 16 supportings. I'm not saying you go all through the 16, you know, pages, but you must ensure you go in detail. Business support, you know, as an accountant, you know, we should start coming out from an accounting mindset to a business partnership mindset. As an accountant, we normally have a habit of, you know, standing on the one side and pointing out that there is a mistake. I think we have to go and sit and stand along with the business, empathize and understand the pain which they are also, you know, getting from the same shoe. So wear that, you know, shoe. Don't say no. There's a max. You know, many of our team members had this habit of saying that ye nahi ho sakta hai. You know, I think you have to understand, how, you know, what's the solution here. You should be in a solution mode rather than telling that there is a problem. So problem versus solution. Last 2 points. Challenge yourself. We all have been in a habit of having traditional budgets. You go and monitor, but you see a budget making process. You say, what is the percentage against last year? So somebody says it's 25%, and then you get into a negotiation. Can we fix it at 10%? Go back and see whether it's a good cost or a bad cost. Challenge yourself, challenge your traditional ways of working, even in creation of a strategic budget for next 5 years, 3 years, whatever you're doing. Last is find out your monotonous jobs and replace that with technology. Use that time to get into analytics and understand business. So I'm sorry, I'm a little bit prescriptive here, but I think it was important for all of us to give the gets to whoever is attending. These are certain I would say filters which I've got in last 3 months. Over to you, Kabir.
Great, Nitin. Thanks a lot. I'm going to sim through the questions. There's a question from Ashish Verma on Mother Dairy, very specific. I'm not going to take it live. Sanjay, can I ask you to answer to him, in private or in the Q&A list itself? So
sure, we'll do that.
Private question. I'm going to actually switch and ask Manas a question on employee mental health, not just because he comes from the healthcare industry, but I think he is a leader who's very, very sensitive to the diversity, challenges. And there are certain things that, that he implemented directly in his team. And I'm sure, the audience will benefit, and coming from a CFO, that as to how he was very, very sensitive to, to the challenges that work from home brought about, and not equally, I would say, to people of different gender. And he has a good, diverse team members in his team. So Manas, why don't you just highlight the audience on how you were proactive about this topic and how you addressed it.
Thank you, Kabir, and thank you for bringing that. I think very close to the way I believe the working standards it should be, rather than accounting standards or financial protocols in an organization. So just to give one line to the entire audience, Oakhurst, the global corporate finance team sitting in Mumbai, controlling 21 countries, has a very wide spectrum of professionals and a gender neutrality. We have more than 35% of our people who are women, and women at every level. So they are heading the tax, they are heading the indirect taxes, risk management, treasury, and so on and so forth, many. And quite of them are very, very young, having children, maybe, or may not have even a children, between few months to few years old. Now, look at a situation, Kabir and my all co-panelists share, that when you go to office, you live behind your family, live behind your kids at home, with a care, whatever you can afford to do, whether it's a family care or a professional care you can get. But when you are in home and working from morning till evening, and the calls can come at any time, any moment, you are also not only working for the organization from office, but you are also working along with your kids without any support staff of maid or household chores, and doing it yourself. And unfortunately in India, there is a bias, right? Still, a female CFO will go for the morning cooking, but the male CFO will not go for doing a morning cooking or probably cleaning the utensils, unfortunately. But that bias in India we still have, whatever way it is. I have seen people who have maintained it during this period without any kind of emotional breakage, as well as I have seen people, particularly the lady, who called me up in the morning and saying, "Sir, I'm unwell, and please allow me for a day's leave." I have spoken this thing for one of my very senior colleague, a lady colleague of mine, many forums I have, and this is on the very second week of the COVID. Technically speaking, I would have not even known that whether she's working from home or not. But look at the person's professional ethics in this, when herself, she comes back, says, "I'm unwell, I will not be able to work, and I would like to have a leave." That makes two things very clear. One, we are in the right hand. It's not that we should be only proud of these professionals, but we should be always feel grateful that we are in the right hand. The person who can take care with all the professional integrity. So during this period and the very beginning, I said, rarely I told people to come back by end of day, right? Make objective actions, do whatever you can do, give a little bit of flexibility during this period. I have seen people when I'm on the call or in a group call, there are kids either crying behind or roaming around with all kinds of noises, which are very enjoyable otherwise. But in a meeting, it can be very, very distracting also. But they managed more than what I could manage. I think during this period, they are the people who are not the warriors. They're the real leaders who work for it and handle it well. And salute to those people who have really done. As an organization, we are always very, very supportive to people. Gender bias is a complete no-no for us. And we did it. Kavit, this was my experience in working during this period.
Lovely. Thank you a lot. I know I'm acutely clear that we are getting to time. So I'm going to take one more question and then hand back to Deepak. A couple of questions which are in there I may not be able to take here. Nisha's question directly to Sequoia. Can I ask Harshal to please type an answer to her? Please, if you can. And I'm just going to take one question which has come from Dheeraj. So because a very, very good question. To Nitin, to actually examine it, because he's probably one of the people who have really, really impacted and had to go really threadbare. What criteria did you apply for identifying and prioritizing vendors for making payments? So the question is to CFOs other than Anand and Manas, who are in a good cash position. But so therefore, I'm going to pick up Nitin here. And Nitin, how did you, because I'll tell you the cue. I mean, I don't know how many of you, missed it. Nitin actually made a reference that he's actually spending a lot during this time as well. So look at the dilemma that you have virtually your sales, down to zero, most of your fixed cost, still continuing. And as a CFO, you've got to take that troubled, task of spending as well. So I would hate to be in his shoes. And he's been able to keep his chin up, in the last 3 months. So Nitin, what tools did you use to prioritize, payments?
So I don't know whether, I actually mentioned it. So our first priority was to make the manpower payments. Even though we didn't got any payments from the retailers for, March as well. Many of the retailers have not even paid for the March month. But we made sure that the first priority is to make sure that the manpower service providers, whoever are the service providers for us, we ensure that we make payments for the month of March. The normal cycle is 1 month. You complete the month of March, and normally we have 30 days for making that payment in the month of April. So you get the bill, and then you have another 30 days for making that payment. We ensured that we made those payments early. Second was all the MSME payments. So irrespective of wherever they are working, we release some payments. Even we have been in the process of doing some capex, even though the capex was shut down. And this capex was specifically for a mall where we wanted during rains. Some of the work was under process, and then we couldn't complete it, even though we went ahead and we made certain payments to the MSME. So the criteria essentially was a humanitarian. We wanted to understand who can't support themselves, from an economics perspective. The second, after that, of course, the releasing the salary, wages and the MSME. The second criteria was the good cost, again, which is, how can I make my consumer feeling safe once he comes back inside the mall? So we made sure we spend huge cost in terms of sanitization. We made sure we have a lot of spend we have done in terms of digitization. So when you come to a mall, Kabir, next time you try the touchless parking, you try sitting on a food court chair and ordering and making payment, from the seat itself. So we have tied up with certain service providers who can help us, doing that. As soon as you enter the mall, there is a touchless, QR code where we are trying to link it with Arogya Setu, which can help you in and both of us to being safe. We have spending some good cost on providing isolation rooms and doctors. So it's essentially the good cost which we are spending on. So these were the three criteria for spending in these in 3 months.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nitin. Rajat actually had a follow up. So since it's an important one, I'd like to take that and and then give my concluding remarks. Rajat, Manas did mention, and he was not coming only from a diversity angle. He came from a diversity angle because it is slightly different for for people of different gender to be able to manage the same thing. So it's not a level playing field. So that's where he was coming from. To where we pointed at to you when we were coming together earlier preparing for this. So I was basically saying we were collecting all great ideas of how do we address mental health during this work from home situation that we actually created. And we all said and most of us have great ideas, and a common theme was that can we have camera not ready meetings, so that we don't force people to be always at their best and in front of cameras. They can still contribute in their pajamas, in their nightwear. Then we don't have to force them to be at 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning prim and proper in front of cameras. That's one. Second thing, in fact, yesterday I was conducting a webinar and this question was posed to me. So I'm going to give a very, very simple answer. It starts first with self-reflection, self-awareness. And this is so underrated, because we as a culture, as a community, we've always been born and brought up to kind of serve others as in, normally our family, our immediate family, our parents, our relatives. We don't take time, to look at ourselves. I think we are all going through huge amount of mental stress. Yeah. So we should probably look at the self-reflection, self-awareness, and we should react to symptoms from the body when it becomes too much, and then just take, whether it is taking time off. Harshal, made a great reference that he takes his time off to be with his kids, tells his secretary that I'm out, during these 2 hours. It is blocked in my calendar. Don't touch it. Yeah. And when you are a leader, you can afford to make that statement. But when you're a team member, you just need to do it on behalf, of them, because they may not voice, that concern. So it starts with self, then goes to the family, then goes to your extended family, which is your team members, and that's how I think we expand the concentric circle of, improving mental health. With that aside, I'm just going to summarize and hand over back to Deepak. Look, when you crush grapes is when you get wine. Yeah. Diamonds are produced, under pressure, and olives need to be pressed in order to get, olive oil. If you're feeling crushed, if you're feeling under pressure, if you're feeling, pressed, I think, there is something good that is going to, come at the end of it. So hang in there. There are going to be, actually fruits, of all the trauma that we are going through, in this 3 months. I would also just, highlight the fact that this is probably not the time to, when I say preserve capital, we didn't say, save or, cut costs or anything of that sort. This is the time for you to actually invest. And there were so many examples from almost all of them, to Manas doing an M&A deal, to Nitin, looking at investing in costs that he can't charge back from a consumer. So very clearly CFOs are looking at from an, end-to-end, perspective and doing that. So this is the time. This too shall pass, and we will come out, stronger. We will come out, a lot more healthier. We will come out probably challenging all the gospels that we were earlier used to. If a turmeric milk, can be innovated in 1 month's time, and the past innovation cycle was 6 to 9 months' time. Now Sanjay is going to question every innovation cycle that is going to take that long. Yeah, as to why can't we do it, in a month's time. So that's the new normal that we are also going to, get open to. So Deepak, over to you to just summarize and close.
कबीर, लगता है लॉकडाउन ने आपको शायर बना दिया, और बहुत अच्छा actually, so it's so beautifully summed up. And I think no one knows when this pandemic is how long it's going to last and when it's going to get over. We will all find an equilibrium with our life and work and everything. But I think the CFOs are really holding the fort and making sure the companies will survive, not only now, but also in the future. And today's discussion was outstanding, because you heard less about numbers and you heard more about the human touch. And that showed really the other side of a CFO, I would actually say so. You know, so a big thank you, Kabir. I think it was beautifully moderated. It's not easy to do this on a digital window, but you've done a great job. Manas, Harshal, Nitin, Sanjay, Anand, it was extremely engaging conversation. I'm also in a habit of knowing you guys a little bit more. So let's spend a quick 5 minutes in understanding that. Kabir, I know you are a fitness freak and you spend a lot of time in the gym. And last year you also won a CEO MasterChef bragging rights as well. So what have you been doing? I mean, is there a new dish that you have invented? What is your new fitness regime? What's happening around?
Well, I mean, I think most people here don't know, and that's how Deepak and I met when he was actually running the MasterChef, event, and my wife and I just turned up, and to our surprise, we actually got selected in the preliminaries, and then we put in a lot of effort, to kind of, work for it, and we couldn't believe that we actually won the MasterChef. So, which has put a lot of pressure, onto me, because now I'm being judged by my children on those standards. And they give me truly MasterChef, Australia kind of comments, saying that, the pungency of the tomatoes is cutting through the, through the sauce, and I'm not feeling it, and all this kind of, stuff. But absolutely, yes, Deepak, I think I picked up bread making skills just before the pandemic, started. So thankfully, for the first few weeks when we couldn't, go out and get some bread, so my family could rely on me baking bread, on a daily basis and do that. So I would say my sanity has always been cooking. Yeah, because it, and I keep saying this on a serious note, for all those people who have a left brain profession, please pick a right brain hobby. It probably helps you to balance, and bring sanity. So whenever I feel stressed, I actually go and hit the kitchen. And when I start whopping up something, new, it probably brings, sanity and balance, to my life. And absolutely right. So I'm now trying to not do simple things, but I try and see very complex recipes, complex techniques. And since I have all the time in the world, I try and master them. Yeah. So I'm continuing on my journey. Actually, my wife was very disappointed that the second round of MasterChef didn't happen, because we were really preparing for it to retain the title.
Well, you have all the bragging rights, Kabir. You can definitely try all the complex dish. We will be planning to do something around that, so I'll come back to you on those front. But खाने की बात चलिए तो can't miss out a Gujarati here. So probably Harshal, I know that we get the best theplas at your home, but
Yes.
is there a dish that you're really dying to eat which you haven't eaten in the last 90 days? And I'll also add on, is there a restaurant that you're really looking forward to visit which you have been missing for a while?
Folks, some of the folks here know I'm from Bombay, but now in the Bean City in Bangalore. But you can't take, Bombay out of me. But yeah, I miss all the good restaurants, Nitin, in Orbit Mall. Starting from the, from the Shiv Sagars to the South Indians and or everything in between, right? We've been grateful that we've had great meals, at home, and we try and emulate and copy Bombay. We don't get all the ingredients. I mean, the sev puris and stuff, but it's good fun. But I've taken a lot of time to, retain the kid inside me, right? Because I think what Kabir said is introspection, wearing your own oxygen mask before you give it to others, right? If you don't retain the kid in yourself, you're so happy when you're 10 years old, you're 15 years old, like, there's nothing to worry about in life, right? You can do that for half an hour a day, right? So I play a lot of chess, I play a lot of music, I read, and I have no patterns. I just do things randomly. I have no calendars for life. Just do things randomly and have fun, right? And just keep. That's I think that's the way God intended life to be. So we should not focus it into boxes. So.
Excellent, and Nitin, I think you have beautifully summed by saying that you have work for home and work from home time very clearly divided. So now we have heard a lot from work from home from your side. So let's hear a bit from work for home, and don't say BJP, so don't say let's go a little beyond that, and let's hear something from the work for home perspective of yours.
So, unfortunately, what had happened was my wife felt on the day of Holi and she broke her wrist. And we had in-laws and my mother also came in. So we had all the trainers and so I learned cooking and I started on every Saturday and Sunday. Made sure that I prepare 2 dishes, one for lunch and one for dinner as well. My every morning ritual is to get up early in the morning before everybody gets up, to make sure that the sweeping work is complete. and and uh, and we are looking for dishwasher because I want to help myself on this. Uh, every day night, that's the last ritual I do that, which is just washing, cleaning my dishes around and closing the day. So so this is how the day starts, and in during the day I just go across to my son, play with some mischief with him. He's has his online classes, and then my mom is there. I try to tell her that we'll play housey at night. She is very fond of that. So these are like work for home, those times which are allotted during the day.
Interesting. Looks like, this lockdown is going to make all of us some wonderful chefs. Yeah. So this is interesting. Sanjay, your family is in Bombay. You are in Delhi. So
Yeah.
who has been your companion for the last 60 days? Yeah.
My parents, I'm staying with my parents who are 80 plus, and it's a blessing to be with them. And Nitin was mentioning, I think so on a lighter side, from Scotch to Scotch Bright and from bar to the Vim bar. Yeah.
Lovely.
So,
Interesting.
and I am a running enthusiast, and also many people don't know. Before even joining Mother Dairy about 3 years back, I have turned vegan, and I am a fruitarian, 70% fruitarian. Yeah.
Good.
So that's
So
keep
your
me.
cutting skills have improved, I'm sure, over the last
And
60 days.
basically, what I'm seeing, being fruitarian, you don't need to wash your utensils. Also, you just need to wash your knife. Yeah.
And Manas, now as you're enjoying your aromatic tea every day, so, I'm sure that you must be enjoying many more things in the lockdown. So are there interesting movies? Is there anything interesting that you've been doing that you want to share with everyone?
Yeah, I'm really feeling very, very minority here, right? I can't cook, I can't dance, I can't sing, I can't do anything. So what I'm doing right now is, trust me, I can't do anything. I'm the most obnoxiously most poor guy in terms of an extracurricular activity of my life. So 2 things to share with you, interesting. One is that in Mumbai, we actually stay, me and my wife. So my wife does a lot of sketching and painting, so I watch that most of the time. And secondly, we spent a lot of evening time without any Scotch and Scotch Bright because I'm a teetotaler. So on the some of the Indian classical and rag-based music, we opt for one ragas and then work onto it, not as a singer but as a listener. On that, and of late in the late night at 10:30 plus, I have found out a new interesting thing, which is watching on the Facebook videos or the YouTube videos, where a lot of people give a different ways of managing home. So maybe electronics, maybe digital, maybe doing cleaning and so on and so forth. So it's very interesting that how innovative people are to manage their day-to-day things. So that videos I watch regularly and keep on buying those stuff on Amazon. Amazon is the best. Unfortunately, the Amazon CFO is a good friend, but he's not here. He would have been very happy that the amount of money I'm spending on them to buy those. So this is what, nothing else. Very, very poor. No interesting things, Deepak.
No, that's good. And Anand, you know that I enjoy calling you the busiest corporate leader here. So did this lockdown gave you any time to try your hands other than the work, or is it or are you itching to go back to the office and do more? So what has been your life over the last 90 days?
No, I think, I don't know what it was, Deepak, but I'll take it in the right spirit. It's been still very busy. As I said, for us, work is continuing as usual, but, I like to, I've become very regular in my morning 10K run. Every morning I do a 10K run. So I'm feeling very nice about it because I lost some good weight. And fortunately, being in Mumbai, we have always a housemate which is always there. So I'm privileged. I don't need to worry about too much of food and other things. And it's not a great of something which I mean, I can manage to cook something if I need to. So that's a satisfaction. But exotics, I prefer to not try on because unnecessary, don't have that much liberty and luxury. But otherwise, yeah, it's been busy. I think it's been, in a way, a great experience, I must say, this working from home and how we still manage to do things. And, I'm getting a bit, philosophical about this, that, what an amazing human race is. We adapt ourselves so well to whatever it's thrown at us, and I think to me, that's the greatest, I would say, my learning over the last 2-3 months. I'm the same, happy, enjoying myself. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's good, Missing the office, I must admit, I think it helps you to sort of this work-life balance has become a bit fuzzy with this, working from home, because I always look at the time of travel, whatever, 20 minutes or whatever. It's a great time to cut yourself off from when you're working, when you're going from home to office, you cut yourself off from home worries and when you're returning from office, that's the time when I enjoy. I don't keep a driver in Mumbai, despite all, whatever it is. I never complain of traffic. It's great time to hear good music, enjoy yourself in a nice car, and that's the way it is. So I'm missing that, but can't complain. I think, as Kabir said, these days will also go, but yeah, we have adapted very well. All my panelists also are saying, we are really adapted very well. And thanks, Deepak. Thanks, Kabir, for pushing me to come on this. I really appreciate, Deepak. You've been chasing me for a very long time. But thank you very much again for having me on this panel. Thank you.
No, thanks to everyone. I think it's been a lovely and a wonderful conversation. And I'm going to see all of you again on the next Saturday, all the audience as well, on another very interesting discussion with new set of leaders. Until then, thank you very much. Stay safe, stay healthy. Goodbye. Namaskar.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kabir.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Stay safe. Have fun. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.